So now when we click, this thing's gonna go. What the fuck is that sound? Hello to my favorite people on the planet. How's it going, guys? In yesterday's video we made a bouncy cube using the basic 2D stuff in hips.io. So we have a very decent base understanding of things, and now we're ready to dive deeper into this motherfucking hips.io game engine. Excuse my language, but I really like to curse a lot. So what we're gonna do today, first of all, let's play some game that is made with hips.io. It's called Jungle Hair. It's made by the guy who created hips.io himself. So this is the game. Click to start. Cool music. I don't really know what to do. Okay. You can walk around. You can jump. And you can kill people with your hair. And you can apparently do that. Okay, that's fun. If you're stuck, use the head. Whatever, this is a cool game, and this is the source of that game, and this is the guy who made hips.io. So yeah, look at those contributions, man. Look at those contributed. So you can download the source of that game from GitHub. Just clone it, download zip, and open it up and Visual Studio Code. I'll leave a link to this repository on GitHub in the description, so you can go check it out. But let's take a look at the code that this dude used to make that awesome game. If we open up the game, this is the game code. So this is the main. Remember our main class that extended the hxt.app. He changed the name to game. So yeah, it's a game. It makes sense. But here, if you look at this, there is a file here called entity, a folder. And when you open it up, there are all the entities that you can see in the game. So yeah, there are all entities, but there's a main class here, which is called entity, and it's all part of a package entity, which is the name of the file, the folder, I'm sorry. And if you look at this, every class in this extends entity, so everything extends entity. So yeah, there is that. And the entity thing has some functions, some static functions and some functions that are virtual. And one of those functions is update. But the difference between this update and the update that is in our main class from the last project, or in the game class that extends the hxt.app, is the difference here is that this function is overridden, but this function is original. So it has to get called in order for it to work. But this guy here, it gets called automatically every frame. But this guy, it doesn't get called. So what all of this is about is something called Entity Component System, or ECS. It's the base of a game engine. That's why I don't call hips.io a game engine, and I rather call it a graphics engine, because of this thing here, this entity component system. You have to implement the entity component system in hips.io yourself. So it's not a game engine. You have to develop your own game engine. It's not that hard. It's very easy. I'm gonna show you in a minute, so stick around. for search of Entity Component System and go to the Wikipedia, it says something like this. Entity Component System, ECS, is an architectural pattern that is mostly used in game development. ECS follows the composition over inheritance principle that allows greater flexibility in definition in defining entities for every blah 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 blah. It isn't really not important. The only thing that you have to know about entity component system is that we have entities and we have components. Entities are game objects like the cube from the last episode, but components are the parts that manage the properties that we want our entities to have. Like, we coded some falling property, some gravitational falling property for our cube in the last episode. What if you want a cube and a circle and a triangle and a bunch of other stuff, and we want all of them to have that gravitational fall on them? Are we gonna code that gravitational fall for all of them? That's a really big waste of time. So we develop a component and we develop an entity. All of those triangles and cubes and squares and whatever shape we have in the screen is an entity, and we add one component of gravitational fall to all of them, and we don't have to code the gravitational fall for all of them separately. So yeah, we need an entity component system. But the good news is you don't have to code it yourself. I have already coded it for you. Let me show you. It's totally fucking free. The last time I used hips.io, if you haven't seen the video that I used it, go see it. There's a card over here. You can, yeah. Okay, this is our entity component system. Just be sure to store it. I really appreciate it if you store it. If you don't like it, I don't care. But if you store it, it will really help me to get famous between my friends, and in our university I can go to them and I can brag about my stars. I'm really sorry, guys. I go into deep rabbit holes, but it's gonna be worth it. This video is gonna be amazing, I promise you. While you're making this video is gonna make a difference. So what you want to do is to first store my repository, then clone it. Like, click on this button and click download zip. I'll leave a link in the description to this thing, but this is the link if I forgot to do it, whatever. And okay, we open it up, we extract it somewhere. I like to use my desktop, and we open it up in our Visual Studio Code. By the way, you can press Control or Command K-O. So it's K, release the K, and then press O without releasing the Command or Control button. So, okay, if we open up that project in our Visual Studio Code, it looks something like this. And if we run it, Reveal and Explorer, and where was it? Okay, if you run index.html, we can see the project, and yeah, we already died. So this is the project. For now, what we're gonna do is to just take a look at the main application. So this main.hx file, and make a very simple Flappy Bird like motion with this ECS that I developed. It's gonna be really easy. I'm gonna explain it to you in just a minute. Okay guys, I'm gonna explain a few of very simple things about this ECS. to you to make it very easier to understand. First thing we're gonna look over is GameObject. This is similar to that entity thing that we read about earlier. It's very short class. It's just 55 lines, and it has some basic stuff like a name, a tag, an object, which is a hips.io object that we talked about in the last episode, and it has a list of components. So it can have components on it. This GameObject thing. It has a bunch of functions. This is the constructor. This is how you make a new GameObject, and this thing grabs a component and adds it to this GameObject. This thing removes a certain component that you don't want anymore, and this thing gets a component that is already attached to this GameObject. And this, of course, here is a function which is not overridden. It's an original function that gets called from this main class. Okay, the next thing that we're gonna see and talk about is the component class. The component class is super simple. It has an attachee, which is the GameObject that the component is attached to. It has a scene that it's the scene that the component is inside now. It has a type, which is component by default, but if it's a collider, for example, this thing changes the collider to enable us to identify the type of the component. This is the constructor, and of course the update function, which is an original function. So if we look at this ECS folder, we can see a bunch of stuff like collider or circle collider. Right now we have only circle collider, and it extends collider, which extends components. So circle collider is a component we can use to detect collision and prevent objects from going through each other. But for now, we're not gonna worry about that, since we're making a Flappy Bird game. Then we have this rigid body component, which is that gravity thing that we applied to our cube in the last episode, but now as a component. So we can easily just add this rigid body to every GameObject that we make just by calling this function here in the GameObject. Just calling add component and give it the rigid body, and all of a sudden it's just falling. You don't have to write all the code that we wrote in the last episode to enable it to just fall. So yeah, that's it. And also there's a transform component which holds the position of the GameObject. Any GameObject has a transform component on it by default. So this is really similar to Unity. I just was inspired by the Unity because I'm a Unity developer originally, so there is that. So okay, let's do the fun stuff. I am really sorry for talking this much, but as you can see, the theory is important to understand what I'm doing right now to make that Flappy Bird thing happen. So if you don't know the theory, you're gonna be confused but right now you know everything, and it's gonna be easy for you to implement everything, and everything is gonna fall in the right place just all of a sudden. What we're gonna do here is that we're gonna delete everything and to start a new project. And by everything, I mean this part. We don't need it. And delete everything that is inside this initialization function. We don't need that either. Delete everything that's inside this update function. Leave the main alone. We're not going to change it. It's very simple, you know what it does. And after that, these are our custom functions. So we're gonna delete all of those too. So what we are all left with is one static update list of game objects that are in the scene right now, and the initialization function, the update function, and the main function. Okay, the first thing that we want to do here is to add one game object, one basic game object. To do that, we need a tile. So we need the tile. So here, up here, we have to define a variable tile. I can remember. The type is h2d, the tile, and that's it. And in the initialization function, we're gonna say tile is equal to h2d.tile from color. I hope you remember this stuff, and want to make it red. All right, let's make it some other color, like blue. 1, 2, 3, 4 FF, and let's make it 40 by 40. Or maybe that the 100 by 100 that we used for the last episode is good too. So we have the tile. The next thing that we do is to set the pivot point. Tile that dx is equal to -50, and tile that dy is equal to -50, since we have a 100 by 100 thing. And then we want to create a new game object. So we go up there and define a new variable, var go as game object. It's a game object. Here we say go is equal to new game object, and let's see what inputs it needs in the constructor. It needs the scene, it needs x and y, a name as in string, and a tag. We don't have to give it a name and a tag since it's initiated by default to go and 0. So we only need to give it the scene, so h2d that s2d. We want to position it in the center, so the x value is going to be s2d that width, and the y value, divided by 2. The y value is going to be s2d that height divided by 2. So yeah, we don't need to actually give it a name, so yeah, that's cool. After that, this game object is empty. It's not a bitmap, so we have to add a new component to it in order to be able to see it, and that component is called a sprite. So if we add a sprite to our game object, which has a bitmap on it, we're going to be able to see our tile on it. So we say new sprite, and when we want to initialize a component, it receives 2 input. The first input being the game object that it's going to be attached to, which in our case is this game object, our only game object, and the second input that it receives is our tile. So we give it the tile. So now it has a sprite, and if we compile our code, we're gonna see a blue 100 by 100 box in the middle of the screen. So let's compile it and let's run it. See if it's working. Okay, what happened? Didn't get compiled because we have to install the event beacon. It's really easy to install. It's just do this. Go to the terminal, say xlib, install event beacon. After it gets installed, we're gonna compile it. See, it got compiled, and if you refresh our browser, there it is, our blue 100 by 100 box in the middle of the screen. gonna close all of these other guys so we can really focus here. Okay, let's make this box fall. How do we do that? Easy. Instead of all of those code that we wrote in the last episode, we just say new rigid body. The rigid body gets two inputs. The first one being the game object that we want to attach it to, being the only game object I've seen. And the second input is a boolean, which is called affected by gravity. And if we give true as this second input, it will be affected by gravity. So if we compile our code again and go, when we refresh our browser, it's gonna fall. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much indeed. The reason it's not falling is that we're not activating our game objects using our update methods. So these update methods in game objects, these things which are original, they don't get called ever. So how are we gonna call them? Easy peasy. Having in mind that this is the list of our game objects, which is called update list. We just need to say for each game object in update list, and it has to be small g because it's not a type, it's the name of each game object that we receive from this list of game object. For each one of these game objects, we're going to call game object that update, and we want to give it the delta time that we already have. So we give it this one, and it goes and does its job, and it calls every component it has to update the components too. So now if we build our project and head over and refresh, it's gonna fall, I swear. See? So very, very easily, with this much code, we achieved our last project. So using an ECS is gonna really speed up the process of making games. So the next thing we want to do is to make our cube jump when we click on the screen. So how do we do that? That's very easy using this ECS. And that's why you should store it on GitHub. Please go store it. Come on, man. I need to have something to brag about. Come on, man. First of all, we need to listen to click events. So we do it like this. We say window dot get instance, and then we say dot add event target, and in here we say the name of our function that interprets the event. So we're gonna make a new function here, public function interpret event, and as the input, this function can receive an event which is of the type hex event. I hope that all makes sense. If it doesn't, just ask questions in the comment section. So now, as the input of this function up here, we give this function. This function's name is going to call it automatically whenever there is an event. But we have to fill this function in order for it to work. So in this function, we're going to call a switch case. I'm going to write a switch case on the type of our event that we received. So if the kind of this event is push, if it's push, we want to call a function that we are gonna just write here. Public function clicked. Let me say on mouse click. Okay, that's a good name. So we're gonna call this, and it's gonna receive the event, so we can detect which mouse button was clicked. So here we're gonna call on mouse click. We're gonna give it the event object. So yeah, and always leave this one at the end of your hex switch case. This is the default part. We don't want to do anything at the default case. So now whatever we write in this function gets executed when the player clicks the mouse on the screen. And what we want to do when the player clicks is that we want to add velocity to the rigid body of our game object. We haven't saved the sprite and the rigid body of our game objects anywhere. So what are we gonna do? How are we gonna access the rigid body and the sprite? Using this ECS, it's easy. So go fucking start on the fucking GitHub, please. If you have started already, I'm very sorry to very sorry to tell you constantly to do. It's a joke. I just want to make these videos just not about the tutorial merely, but about other stuff, about my obsessions to brag in front of my friends. Okay, what was I talking about even? I don't even remember. Yeah, we have to add velocity. So how do we access the rigid body? Like this. We say go, the name of our game object here, dot get component, and here we specify the type of component that we want, which is rigid body, and yeah, we have to save it in a component, so it's a component. So we say component of type component is equal to this. Notice the difference between this component and this component. So okay, then we have to cast this component, which is of the type component, to a rigid body, and it's done like this. Variable rb of type rigid body is equal to cast component to rigid body. So this cast is a function. It receives an object and a type and turns that object into that type if it is possible. And in this case, it's possible because a rigid body is also a component, which is a rigid body. So now we want to add some velocity. So rb.velocity is equal to new vector2, which also is a part of this library of this ECS that I developed. So a vector2 is a vector that has an x and a y. So how do we make a new vector2? We want a thing to go up when we click, right? So we say 0, we don't want it to move left or right, and we say minus 50. And notice that I used minus here because in heaps, whenever you go down, the y value increases. So if you want to go up, you have to apply the minus velocity. So now with everything in place, we can now safely run our code. First of all, I'm gonna compile it, and then if we go to our browser and we refresh this, okay, when we click, it kind of stops because this 50 is not enough. So let's try 500. And compile it first. Let's try 500. Okay, 500 seems good. So now when we click, this thing's gonna go. What the fuck is that sound? This thing. This thing's gonna. The guy's car sounded like whistle. Okay, maybe he was singing or something. The car was singing. Okay, yeah, that. I'm sorry for going off topic, guys. I'm really stupid, as you know if you've watched any of my other videos. So okay, this is what happened here. This is one of our achievements. Okay, this is our achievement for this episode, and the next episode, we're gonna turn this into a complete Flappy Bird game. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your comments. If you have any suggestions about how this series should go, leave it in the comments down below, and I'll apply them on this series. And don't suggest that I should not go off topic and shit like that. That's just only my nature. I just talk about stuff and I forget. I can't focus. I really like it, but yeah. Okay, so yeah, let's see you guys later. See you. Have fun.